Welcome back, everybody, Coast to Coast, This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned, our guest, Deke Rivers, author of the book, The Quest for the Three Keys. Deke is a retired architect, now lives in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As a child, his family escaped from Estonia when the Red Army invaded during World War II. The Rivers family moved to Europe, Australia, then Canada, eventually settling in the United States for 15 years, finally returning to Canada in 2012. Deke has traveled extensively around the world, circumnavigated the globe as an architect, and now as an author. He's written 20 novels, including The Quest for Three Keys. That's what we'll be talking about on today's This Week in America. Deke, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just talk briefly before we get to talking about the book, that childhood that you had, and I talked about there. Talk about what that was like and how that's really shaped your life. You moved a lot as a child. You saw a lot as a child. How has that impacted you as a person and you as an author?
Well, I guess being a left behind DP or displaced person as such, the family circumstances were always such that I ended up being alone, and I had to somehow manage to get through life, and I ended up, researching everything that was around me, whatever I could grab, and I guess, and then when the family moved from Europe to Australia, and then on to Canada, just because of the circumstances and economics, I guess the wanderlust sort of came into my whole life, and I had to learn all about what was going on around the world, and so I ended up doing a lot of traveling. I spent 4 months in Europe, going back through all the various countries again. Stayed out of the Iron Bloc countries, of course, because I didn't want to be welcomed back as a comrade. And then I was down in Australia, spent 10 years down there, so we got to see a lot of Australia and everything else, and ended up going back there once I was married with my own kids, and did some more traveling through the Great Barrier Reef and the outback and so on. But there was always this quest for information about how other people were surviving around the world, and I guess it's just the fascination of learning and experiencing what was going on just kept me going. And,
I mentioned the 20 novels, just finished novel 20. We're talking about The Quest for the Three Keys. If you go to Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, you'll find all the information there on Deke's books, or you can go to bookventure.com. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly to that Book Venture website and get information on all of the books. This book deals with a quest across Europe for lost Nazi art treasures buried during World War II. It's a fascinating read that we'll talk about on the program today. But where exactly did this idea come from?
I guess I always had a fascination for Europe, obviously, and I love going through all of the old history, and I guess that's where I developed my architecture from. But I always knew that the conquerors always accumulated some kinds of treasures. So, it was obvious after doing some research, finding out that a lot of the German generals, of course, were instructed by Hitler to try and steal all the artwork around Europe, basically to build a largest art gallery in the world for Hitler's mausoleum whenever he passed away. And Hitler had seen Napoleon's burial place in Paris under the dome, the Cathedral of the Dome, and he was super impressed. So he wanted to do something a little bit more. So he sent out orders to accumulate as much art as you could. But the generals weren't stupid either, so they started selling a lot of it on the black market and making fortunes for themselves. So the basic story is around. No specific general by name, but so I just called him Herr General. But he did accumulate a lot of artwork, and in the sale of the artwork, he made himself a vast fortune. So obviously, most of that, all of the money was always placed into the Swiss accounts, and the other art was hidden somewhere in Germany, but in the transition of that, he had to find a place because the war was still going, to be able to hide these particular art works that were still left that hadn't been sold, and basically he had to find a place where he could hide them, and that wouldn't be destroyed during the war years. So he researched around, and he decided that he'd hide them in two of King Ludwig of Bavaria's castles, and as they would not be bombed by any of the opposition and allies and so on, and would be preserved. So that's basically what he did. And
yeah, and here's a guy who really loved puzzles, and it's interesting how he goes about with the manuscripts written in different languages. This was very elaborate, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, that was one of the problems that the Mafia basically had, and when they first got their hands on the manuscript, and then of course the architect himself also, fortunately, his parents were Estonian, so he was able to translate one of the languages, and he knew some German, so he was able to do a part of that, but he didn't have the Russian part of it, so he teams up with a young lady that he met in Nantucket from Belarus, who could speak fluent Russian and part German. So together they decided that hey, they were going to chase down this particular puzzle and work it out. And being an architect, he was able to quickly solve the keys or the clues and proceeded on it. But meanwhile, the art collectors in around the world all heard about this whole thing, and so they wanted to get in touch and get a hold of this manuscript so that they could chase down the art for themselves. And
yeah, you've had a number of different groups looking for the art. You mentioned that the Mafia becomes involved in this. It's a story of international intrigue. The book by Deke Rivers, and Deke is Deke Rivers, The Quest for the Three Keys. It's available by going to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The website for information is bookventure.com. You can log on directly to that website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's go back and talk about, you mentioned the architect, and you have an architect in a lot of the books that you've written. Obviously, it's a subject you know a great deal about. Stuart Steele is the architect here. And this, as you mentioned, it starts in Nantucket. And when he becomes aware of this, and he becomes a major character throughout the story. Right. And it's you mentioned
architecture is something I grew up with. I guess became an architect and spent 40 years doing it. And took me around the world in South Africa, Australia, all through the United States, Canada. I spent 6 years up in Alaska. Building a big hospital for the U.S. Army at Fort Wainwright and Fairbanks, which was an experience and a half in itself.
Well, talk about the...
So, yeah, architecture is a big part of it. And in fact, the first book I ever wrote, which is now coming out as two books, because the first book I wrote was over 1,400 pages long.
Wow.
And so it's coming out in two parts, the Scarlet Saga 1 and Scarlet Saga 2. One is the father, and the two is the son. So, but it's a fascinating story in itself. So, but we're talking about the quest for the three keys today. So we'll skip that one.
Yeah, and it gets a lot of books, and you need to look it up because you've got The Singer and His Songs. You've got a sequel to that that came out recently. You've got The Architect, The Invisible Invasion, a number of books. This one, I'm assuming, required a lot of research on your part. As I mentioned, you've got the international intrigue, and you're very graphic because this does go internationally. Are a lot of these cities that you visited that you have some recollection of because of your journeys?
I've been through all the castles. I've been through all of Europe. That's one thing about all the books that I write. Most of the places that I write about are places that I have been to. So I can relate to it, and then of course, I've forgotten the hotel names and stuff like that. So I use travel guides to enhance the actual factual addresses of different hotels and names. But most of the cities, in fact, pretty well all the cities that I write about, I have been to, I'm familiar with. So, yeah, it's part of my world travels, I guess.
Well, and it's interesting that the characters, the general that you talk about, he really was looking out for his family, and he knew that what they were attempting in Germany was going to fail, didn't he? So he was concerned about
He did.
future for them, and it's interesting as you see that develop and how he sets out with the different manuscripts. How long did it take to write the book, to get everything nailed with the research? Because it just jumps off the pages you're reading. Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of these stories, they sort of develop in my brain, but ultimately I end up writing out the storyline first, and then I work out the details as I go through, making sure that everything is super. What's the word I'm looking for here? Consequential and in proper sequence, and then I fill in the details as I go along, and that's one of the hard parts, is because a lot of the stories, switch back from one to the other and back and forth and bring back things from the past and so on. So it takes time, but. I guess the last two books I've written probably within a period of maybe 3 or 4 months.
It's interesting with the background in architecture, decades that you've spent as an architect. Does that help you as a writer? And I'm thinking in terms of structure, as you're putting a story together. You need a good foundation. This plot really isn't supported yet. I need to bring something in. Is there a correlation between the two?
Absolutely. The first book, which is coming out as the Scarlet Saga, it actually puts you into the shoes of the young CEO who takes over the Scarlet Corporation, International Development Construction Project Management Organization, and puts you in his shoes and deals on a day-to-day basis as you go through of all the deals and all the things that he has to look after. Meanwhile, he's trying to chase down the person that had his father assassinated, and then he wants to know who's paying the hitman, and then ultimately he finds out that he's the next target. So the whole thing is based around his survival, but also still running the corporation as well. So the whole thing is that whole book, that Scarlet Saga, is based on my knowledge of the building industry.
And I get the impression in talking with you, this really is a passion. This is something you enjoy doing. I get the impression you enjoy when you sit down and you get a chance to develop the characters and work on the story.
Yeah, that's the fun part. The ability to the story's one line, but developing the characters, I think, is probably more enjoyable than anything else, because you've met people along the way, and you sort of look at their characters, and you've seen movies, and you've read other books, and looking at the background, and it's just, I think, the fascinating part of it. Yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's something I look forward to, and I'll keep on doing it, because it is part of my life now, and much more than even architecture was. I think architecture was something that I had to do for maintaining my family, but this is the writing books right now is just a pastime, and for me it's enjoyment.
Well, 20 novels and counting. The one we're talking about is The Quest for the Three Keys. Deke Rivers, our guest in the program, coming to us from Toronto, Canada. Information available at the website bookventure.com. The book is available, and all of Deke's books available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Talk about a couple minutes left in the program, The Quest for the Three Keys, and I keep coming back to this. There are a lot of moving parts here. You've got a lot going on there. You've got the mystery, you've got love stories, you've got suspense, you've got international
intrigue. There's 4 stories in one there, basically.
Well, yeah, you've got a lot in there. Talk about, as a writer, when you're doing that and you've got all of these balls in the air that you're juggling at the same time, trying to bring all of the story along at basically probably the same pacing, and then resolve it all at the end.
Yeah. No, that's the fun part of it. I think every book that I've written so far has multiple, more than just one story in it, because every character that you develop has their own story, and you have to sort of explain to people, why certain things are happening in the book, and they always relate back to the different personalities that you're dealing with, and each one has a history. The story that I've got going right now on called the Fashion Designer, another book, and it deals with again an Estonian family that immigrates before the war back over to the United States, and they become very successful in California. Well, he just happens to run into a young lady that's down on her luck. Her father's been killed in an industrial accident, and he takes her to a studio that's looking for an actress, and she falls into that particular category and is a talented woman and develops an actress. But meanwhile, he runs into another gal at the university where he's studying to get his doctorate degree. That's just arrived over from Ireland, where his father or his mother was killed by the IRA there, and so they moved from Ireland to get away from the religious prosecution, and she moves to the United States, and from there she goes down to study in Los Angeles. Well, all of a sudden there's this threesome that the initial gal, the Irish girl, and the initial project manager or architect himself, and they sort of develop a romantic triangle, which ultimately, each one has their own little separate story going on, and somehow you got to pull it all together at the end.
Well, yeah, and you do so well in this book, The Quest and the Three Keys. You're talking about another book that Deke is working on. All of the books available, information at bookventure.com. You can find them at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. A couple minutes left in the program. You start the book off, The Quest for Three Keys, talking about the history of looting through the ages. And that, I guess, is why the book is so much fun to read, because it could be like an actual storyline. I mean, as I'm reading this, I see this as being totally believable. Is that part of the fun in writing? You don't have characters that fly and things that, don't happen in real life. I'm reading this and I'm thinking this really could be based on an actual German general.
Well, it is. I never mentioned his name because of obvious reasons. They're all of it major generals in Germany all were participating in this black market situation, and that's a recorded fact. So the basic story picks one of them, and I think there is. I think somebody wanted to research the actual acts of what happens in the book. They are true to life facts. So it is based on a specific general.
And you've got that believability going. So as you're reading this, it's like, this all makes sense. It's interesting at one point how Hitler's concerned about some of the generals, this general in particular, becoming too popular. But he needed these people to be with him, so there wasn't a whole lot he could do with it. It's just a fascinating look at...
They were vital to him because without them he couldn't get anywhere.
Yes. So you're sort of a little bit into the mind there. It's a great story. It's a story. You've got love interest involved in there. You've got suspense. You've got international intrigue. You've got the Mafia thrown in there. It's a great read. It's called The Quest for the Three Keys. The author is Deke.
And we got the South American connection as well.
Well, you've got it all in there. I mean, and it's like playing out a movie in your mind as you're reading this. It's an excellent book, The Quest for the Three Keys.
It would make a great movie.
Yes, it definitely would. Deke Rivers is the author. He's the author of a number of books, 19 other books and counting. The books are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and go to bookventure.com and get information. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on and get all of that. Deke, it's a pleasure having you on the program. Much congratulations on the success that you've had with all of the books. Look forward to talking about future books. This is called The Quest for the Three Keys. Thank you for being with us.
I thank you for having me on. I really do. Appreciate it.
Deke Rivers, our guest, The Quest for the Three Keys, the book we're talking about. Information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. We're back after these messages.